Well, my secret is that when I was a child, I was molested by my stepbrother, and my parents didn't believe me.
Drew and Jonathan Scott here to tell you that American Family Insurance wants to protect your dreams. So whether you're at home singing in the shower,
every note,
or prefer singing your heart out in the car like Drew,
cruising,
you can save up to 23% when you bundle your home and auto insurance with American Family Insurance. Get a quote or find an agent at amfam.com. Insure carefully, dream fearlessly.
Visit amfam.com to learn how discounts may apply to you. American Family Mutual Insurance Company, SI, and its operating company, 6000 American Parkway, Madison, Wisconsin.
Membership fees apply after free trial. Cancel anytime.
Can I be real for a second? That goal you have to exercise and eat better, you really can do it. But nobody is going to do it for you. And nobody has to, because you can do it if you have the right tools and a community that cares about helping you get results. And that's us, Beachbody. It's as convenient as your TV or laptop, but you need to decide that you're worth it. Let us help you succeed. Here's how. Go to beachbody.com to claim your free membership and start feeling great.
This episode contains discussions of sexual assault. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to the Secret Life Podcast. Tell me your secret. I'll tell you mine. Sometimes you have to go through the darkness to reach the light. That's what I did. After 12 years of recovery in sex and love addiction, I finally found my soulmate, myself. Please join me in my novel, Secret Life of a Hollywood Sex and Love Addict, a 4-time bestseller on Amazon. It's a brutal, honest, raw, gnarly ride, but hilarious at the same time. Check it out now on Amazon. Welcome to Secret Life Podcast. I'm Brianne Davis-Gant. Today I'm pulling back the curtains of all kinds of human secrets. We'll hear about what people are hiding from themselves or others. You know, those deep, dark secrets you probably want to take to your grave, or those lighter, funnier secrets that are just plain embarrassing. Really, the how, what, when, where, and why of it all. Today, my guest is Taylor. Now, Taylor, I have a question for you. Dun, dun, dun. What is your secret?
Yes, Brianne. Well, my secret is that when I was a child, I was molested by my stepbrother, and my parents didn't believe me.
Oh, that breaks my heart. I'm sorry. That completely breaks my heart on so many pieces. Okay, let's dig in then. Oh my gosh. Okay, so how old are you now? Can you tell me that?
Yeah, so I'm 30 years old right now. Mm-hmm. I'm happily married. I've got 2 dogs, and I live in Virginia.
Oh, wow. Okay, so happily married. So when did this occur? When you were younger?
Yes, so I was molested over the course of several years. It's hard for me to remember the exact dates and years. I usually say it's started around maybe when I was 7 or 8, and it probably continued for about 3 or 4 years when I was younger. And so I would say it probably went until I was about 10 or 11 years old.
Wow. Yeah, those are any years are bad, but that the awareness is even more daunting. Because I do want to say and reveal I was actually molested as well. And I talk about it. I've talked about it before, but it's still difficult. Do you remember the first time it happened?
I do remember the first time it happened. And it's interesting because as I look back on it, as I'm older, you know, obviously I can see more of the sort of grooming that was going into it and that type of sexual abuse over years. But yeah, I remember the first time it happened. It started as a very much like my stepbrother would be watching me, and, you know, it'd start with me kind of sitting on his lap. And then he would sort of play these quote unquote games, right? Where it'd be like a tickling game or, you know, like the underwear game and things like that. And so that's how it started. And then gradually over the years, it's intensified and turned into, you know, much different types of abuse.
Okay. But I have to stop you because let's go back first, because this is really important, because now we teach kids, like, if you don't want to be touched, say, please don't touch me. Right. Mm-hmm. Like we have those in the tickling and all that stuff. did you like playing with him when you were younger? Like, was he like how much older was he than you?
He's about 10 years older than me.
Oh God. So he's a lot older than you. Okay.
Yes.
So really it wasn't appropriate for him to be tickling you and stuff like that.
Right. Definitely not. Mm-mm. And I think it was because he, I have another brother as well, who's my biological brother. He's just a few years older. But so my older stepbrother, he would be like our babysitter, when my parents were gone. My mom worked, my stepdad worked. And so oftentimes, he would be watching us, and it would occur during those times.
Okay. So can you talk more about the grooming? So if other parents hear about it, they can like keep an eye on it. Can any of that information would be helpful?
Sure. Yeah. So it, like I said, it was usually under the guise of games. So it would be a tickling game where, like, let's say, you would play the game and it would start off as just normal tickling, right? Okay. So maybe it's, tickling under your armpits or something like that. And then it would gradually, maybe the first couple of times he would start tickling, quote unquote, tickling, below the belt or on my underwear or higher on my legs. But then stop. And then maybe a few days later when playing the tickling game, it would escalate and he would do it more and more, or maybe go below my underwear. And then he started kind of creating these other types of games, as he would call them. Like one was like I said, the underwear game, where he would like snap my underwear, the top elastic part of it. And then, he would do that for a couple of times, and then it would escalate where then maybe the next time he would put his hands in my underwear. And then it would escalate, so on and so forth. So it started off mostly like that, but then he would turn other things into games. He would try, eventually it got to the point where he had basically convinced me that giving him oral sex was a game. Right. Really? And I was a child. Yeah. And my parents never, I think the biggest thing for parents, my parents never really had a sex talk with me. Oh. And so I was very young, but I also didn't really I didn't know about any of this. Yeah. And so obviously as an adult now, in hindsight, it's like, how could you, not have known, or how could you not have, thought about this? And I feel a lot of guilt and shame about that. But the reality is I wasn't exposed to any of that.
You were a child, FYI. Whoever says that needs to go do some therapy themselves. You are a child. You put your trust into an adult figure. How are you responsible for being aware of it or not? Right. If no one even taught you to have that conversation, or what to look for, or what's appropriate or not appropriate.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I definitely think, for parents starting off with just having these conversations with kids early, about sex, but also just about what is appropriate and not appropriate, where should you be touched or not touched, or, as you said, boundaries of telling people, being comfortable telling people not to touch you. I think those are really important.
I just have to tell you, and I want your advice on this, just because you've been through this trauma as a child. My son is 4 years old, and we already have the conversation with, no one's allowed to touch you down there. You can, if someone tries to, you can say, no, stop. I will tell my parents. We also say, if we are touching you or cleaning you and making you uncomfortable, this is your private part. This doesn't belong to anybody else. And if you are uncomfortable at any time, you are allowed to say, please stop. Like, we literally at 4 years old, because I read this whole thing, even 6-year-olds are already exposed to sex that early.
Right. Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, I wish that my parents had said something like that to me, because I certainly would have at least been able to identify, something is wrong here, or something is going on, or it's normal for me to feel uncomfortable with this. Yeah. Because it really wasn't until I started getting older, and, being exposed to more and understanding more, that I started to realize this something is wrong here. This is not right. And this is not normal. And started writing about it, in my journal. And so definitely if my parents had even a conversation simple like that when I was when I was younger, I think that would have gone a long way.
Okay, good. I'm just like, because every time we have that we have it often, just so you know, not just don't take candy from a stranger, don't get in that white van, all that other one that we have,
right.
told. But those uncomfortable conversations with a kid saying, hey, if this happens to you, I won't get mad at you. You can tell me it's not okay.
Right. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And as well, and I think what you said, which is great too, is even if we're cleaning you or something and you feel uncomfortable to say something, I think that's so important because for me, since it was a family member and obviously, a lot of these cases, are family members.
Yes.
Right. It's, it wasn't a stranger randomly, running up to me or anything like that. And so it's harder to identify for a child. So that's so important.
I mean, even right at this age when we're playing tickle games, he's allowed to say stop and we have to stop. Like we immediately have to. If he says stop, we stop. No, not even if he's like acting like he still wants to be tickled. We immediately stop. And we say, you do not have to give anybody hugs. You do not have to give anybody kisses. Please. He's not allowed to kiss anybody on the lips at this age, even grandparents. We've been making, because just being in Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous, the amount of people I hear every day that have your similar story is 1 out of every 3 people. I'm not kidding. It's pretty daunting.
It's devastating. Yeah.
It is very devastating and it breaks my heart every time. But let's get back to your story. So this went on and it just kept escalating. Can you go through that escalation?
Sure. Yeah. So it started escalating. So it would start by, as I mentioned, sort of this grooming through games and creating, games. And then, it started with him molesting me, and then it would escalate towards me giving him oral sex, me giving him, essentially hand jobs, him, ejaculating. I remember as a child asking him, did you pee? Or like being like, ew, you peed, because, I had no concept of what was going on. And so it would escalate like that. My, oftentimes, as I mentioned, I do have another brother, and oftentimes he wouldn't be around. He would be off doing his own thing. And so he never really knew what was going on.
He never saw any signs or anything?
No, he never really knew. I mean, he saw, some like of the games in the initial grooming period, like, tickling and things like that. But as far as I know, or at least what he says, that he's never saw, or that it didn't happen with him. But yeah, so it escalated to that point. And really the only reason why it ended was because I started to get older and I wrote about it in my journal, and my mom.
What age was that? Like 10?
Yeah, I would say around 10, 11, 12-ish, I would say. I was writing about it in my journal. I remember because I was in middle school, and my mom found my journal one day and she read it. And I remember she picked me up from school. I was supposed to go to basketball practice, and, she had on some big sunglasses. Like I could tell something was wrong. Like she never picked me up so early. And she told me that she had read it. She basically put the journal in front of me, and I had written something like, I think that I had been sexually assaulted, or I'm not sure what's been going on, but I think it's sexual abuse. Like I was working through it in my own mind as I was getting older. And, and she confronted me about it. And she told me that she didn't believe me. So.
Oh my God. And you were 12 years old, we're guessing?
Yeah.
Oh my God. My heart is breaking for that little girl. Okay. So she shows you the journal. She shows you the journal and then says, I don't believe you. And then what do you do?
I mean, I freaked out. I was obviously very upset because I was like, I didn't understand, because I was like, I don't understand why you don't believe me when I wrote about this in my you know, I didn't understand why she would think I was lying in the first place, because, you know, it was something that I had written about. I hadn't even told her about it, you know, and she found it like, why would I lie about something that I just wrote in my private journal? You know, that didn't make any sense. And I tried to convince her, and I tried to convince my stepdad, you know, the father of my stepbrother, whom we were living with. And it was basically what ensued was like 2 weeks of very like intense arguing, fighting, them saying they don't believe me, saying that, you know, my stepbrother and my stepdad are terrified to even be in the same house as me because, you know, I'm making allegations that are going to ruin their lives. You know, I remember my stepdad, you know, in the middle of one of these heated sort of arguments saying to me, well, if this is true, then let's go to the police station right now and tell them. And, you know, as an adult, it's like, sure, let's go right down to the police station and do it.
But here's the thing, that's not true. I know so many adults that have been sexually assaulted, not even by a family member, and they don't even want to go to the police.
Yeah.
It's difficult to walk into anywhere and say, hey, this happened to me.
Right. And I think as a child, for me, my thought process was like, well, if my parents aren't even believing me right now, then why would the police believe me? And then I'm going to get in trouble because they're going to think I'm lying, you know? And so I, you know, sort of obviously didn't want to do that. And so we argued. I ended up, after about 2 weeks of that, I ended up going and staying with my grandparents for about a month. And then my parents are divorced. So then I went over to my dad's house. And for about 6 months, I used to go week to week, house to house. And so for about 6 months, I just stayed at my dad's house. And I didn't go back over to my mom's house. And then I remember that it was Christmas time. And that was sort of the first time that I was going to go back over. My mom picked me up from my dad's house. And as we're pulling into the driveway, she said to me, now, Taylor, make sure we don't want any drama this Christmas. So make sure we don't want any drama.
Sorry, I have to call your mom what it is. She's a bitch. I'm mad. I'm actually mad at this point. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I shouldn't be judging like that, but I am angry right now.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, trust me, my friends and people and therapists, everyone has a very similar reaction. And I totally understand. I do too.
Yeah, this is the woman that was supposed to protect you when both the mother, your mother, doesn't protect you or believe you. That is actually more traumatic than what occurred. Honestly, that is more damaging to a psyche than the actual sexual abuse.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with that. When I'm talking to my husband or my very close friends, just the inner circle of people who do know this story, you know, that's what I say is the sexual abuse and assault was of course traumatic, but the response was way more traumatic.
That's on a core level. That's where that child isn't being seen or heard by the one person on this earth that is supposed to protect them. Oh my God, I'm going to so cry right now. Like I want to hold little Taylor right now and be like, I'll rescue you from this woman. Yeah. Oh my God, I'm crying.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Honestly, I'm so sorry. And we'll get back to the story, but I just have to say that from being a mother myself, just that must have been so devastating and traumatizing for you.
Yes. I appreciate that. And it was very traumatic for me. And it's been something that has affected me my whole life. And I think that, as you mentioned, there's so many people who I'm sure have these experiences, and
so many.
You know, from an outward perception, we just don't know, or you maybe wouldn't know. But the reality is it's definitely had a huge effect on me, for sure.
It does. No matter you've done the work, you've talked, you have a therapist, you have a career, you are married. Those things you have to heal to get usually those things in a healthy way. So you've done the work, but it's still at a core level, that young girl. I mean, I've in my book, I finally told my mom I was molested by a family friend. And her reaction at 20 something years old when she said, well, what am I supposed to do about it now?
Wow.
It broke my heart. And I was an adult and I've been through years of therapy and 12-step and healing and all of that. And just for your own mother to say, well, it's been so long. What am I, do you want me to tell his mom? Like, what do you want me to do about it now? I can't do anything about it now. And it's like, ouch.
Yeah, seriously.
Do you know what I mean? And you
sure.
went through that in a 10 times worse level at 10, 11 years old. For you to even fight with your mom and your stepdad for 2 weeks and then threaten, go to the, like you are fighting for your truth in your voice of what happened to you. Oh my God, I'm devastated. Sorry, I'm so devastated right now.
No, it's definitely. And you know, that's the one thing that I think I have always, I'm proud of myself for always being consistent with it, for not cowing or backing down to them, because throughout my whole childhood, the rest of, you know, my high school years, and then into college, you know, my parents still didn't believe me. And I always maintained my story, and they, you know, they didn't want to talk about it. And often, you know, it was swept under the rug, and there were years where we didn't talk about it. But it really wasn't until I was in college that, you know, I came home and me and my mom got in another huge blowout about it. And it came up, and I want to say, I think it was a junior in college. And we got in a big argument. And then I remember sitting there and saying to her, you know, and something arguing and like, and you still don't believe me. Like, you still don't believe me. And she's like, no, I don't. And at that point, it's like, you know, I'm like 20 years old, probably 21 years old. And I've maintained the same story. And I remember looking at her, and I literally, this is one of the parts so clear. I said to her, you're going to regret this someday. And I left. I went over to a very close friend's house. I like cut my winter break short. I went back to college. I did not speak to her for several months. And my grandfather, whom I had gone over to their house after those 2 weeks of fighting initially. So they knew what the allegations were and the situation. I told him that I wanted to take a polygraph test because I just couldn't bear that, you know, my parents, you know, her not believing me, or just the anger, you know, I was
the
so
accusations and and the consistency of her denial.
Yes, exactly. Because their perception of me was like, you're lying about this and you're going to ruin these people's lives. You know, you're going to ruin your stepbrother's life. You're going to ruin your stepdad's life.
Are protecting a pedophile. Right.
Exactly. And so
I'm like, look, I'm like standing behind you with the pitchfork right now.
Yeah. And so so my grandpa was really supportive. He found, actually an ex FBI agent who does polygraph tests, and you can go and you can pay to have a polygraph test.
Yes, you can.
Yeah. And so he found, you know, he's like, give me a couple of weeks to figure this out. I'm like, okay. He found someone who was near me in my school. I went with my best friend. I took her. We went. I took the polygraph test. The way he did it was that you know, he had me write down, because for something, you know, for a polygraph, it's like you have to answer like yes or no questions. You can't just like tell a story, right?
No.
And so he said, write down 3 of the most vivid memories of the times, like 3 of the times you can remember the most in as much detail as you can, in like a statement. So I wrote a statement of 3 of the most vivid times. And then he basically asked me questions off of that, you know, is what you wrote, you know, in paragraph 1 true, or those types of questions. And I passed the polygraph. I sent the results to my grandfather, and he sent them to my mother. He, you know, once I sent them to him, he was like, wanted to kind of talk to my mom about it. He sent them to my mom. And then a few months later, my mom called me finally, and we had a conversation about it at that point.
And can you tell us how that conversation went?
Yes. So the positive was that she said that she believed me at that point. But the negatives was that she still continued to blame me. She said that she believed me, but that the reason she didn't believe me as a child, or what you have to understand, I think is how she phrased it to me, was that as a child, you would quote unquote lie all the time. So, which I was,
children lie.
I know. It's like, okay, children lie. I don't have any memories of lying more than usual, but regardless, it's like, okay. So I would lie about what, taking $1 from my brothers,
and did you put your plate away or wash your hands? They immediately lie. And I look at my son and say, you are lying right now. And he goes,
exactly.
Oh my God. Okay.
Right. Exactly. And so that was my conversation with her. And then my stepfather, it was like maybe a month or so or two after that he called me, and he still didn't believe me. He refused to read the statements. My mom read the statements in addition to the polygraph results, and he refused to read it. And he basically said to me, I stand behind, my son, and, whatever may or may not have happened when you both were children, is in the past, basically, is what he said. And so, that was kind of their response at that point.
Now, how did you feel after that conversation? Can I just ask?
Yeah. I mean, angry, really angry because, here I was like already being like, this is, so unjust. This is so unfair, so frustrated that they did not believe me, going through this, saying I'm going to take a polygraph, and then to have that be the response. And especially from my mom to say, I believe you, but I'm going to still blame you. It just showed, her distorted perspective. I think from my stepdad, my anger was towards both of them, but the majority towards my mom.
Yes.
Because my stepdad, it's like, at least, in a way, and it sounds crazy, but it's like, in a way, it's like, well, he's supporting his son, right? Not like he shouldn't have, he should still have believed me and all this, but it's like, what my mom, I'm like, why can't you support me? Right.
No, but let me just stop you. I can't even allow you to finish this sentence because it makes me so angry. Listen, if my son grew up and did that to a girl or another kid, you better believe that I would take accountability and have him, whether I love him for every fiber of my being, there is right and wrong. And I would get him in major therapy. It would be discussed. And listen, that is a responsibility as a parent. To sweep it under the rug is a disservice to the growth of the child that needs obviously mental health and support. And your stepdad denied him that growth and denied your truth. And that damage is irreversible sometimes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it's been, after that, we really, I came home one, I think the next summer, I'm a lawyer. I don't know if I had mentioned that. And I have experience working in a public defender's office and with public defenders. And so with clients, working with a lot of people who do commit crimes. Right. And so I am the type of person, I have a lot of empathy but I remember we went home and my stepbrother wanted to speak with me and my mom. And so me and my mom and him all met up, and I remember he admitted it to my mom, and he apologized. And I remember just kind of being like, this is a conversation. I wasn't even, I was like, I don't want to have this conversation right now. Like I still needed to obviously process everything myself. And then I remember, so he's done and we're getting into small talk. I was working for the public defender's office that summer. And he said to me, was doing small talk about like what I was doing. And it came up and he said like, I just don't understand how you can defend those people. I just don't understand how you can defend people that. And I didn't,
it's one of those moments again, where it's like in hindsight, you could think of a million great responses. Like, oh, what do you mean? People like you?
Yeah.
But of course in the moment, again, I was 20 years old, but, and even with that, like it didn't change with my parents. I still have to see him, once a year, at around Christmas time. And I obviously don't want to anymore. My husband and I are, trying to conceive right now. And I think that now I'm in a place where I think I was able to, or more willing to perhaps tolerate more than I would with a child in my life. And so now, as we're sort of getting older into this, it's kind of all coming to a head where, I'm going to need to address this and say, I don't want to see him anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And be okay with perhaps that ends the relationship with my parents. I don't know. But we'll see. So.
Yeah. And listen, as a responsibility as a parent to even get your child in the vicinity of someone like him, to me is, and it's like, you have to, look at me, I'm like giving you a therapy session, but people are like, stop talking, Briam. But the point is like, you have to claim yourself now. Right. Like you keep making concessions going back. I mean, if I was your therapist, I would say, hey, please, like maybe let's not go back to the scene of the crime anymore. There might be a grieving process of you letting go. I had to let go of, I didn't talk to my dad for almost 2 years.
Yeah.
What I wanted him to be, he could never be. And I had to grieve the loss of the father I never had. Does that make sense? So this is like for you, the mother you never had, and you always wanted her to be.
Absolutely. No, I think that's a perfect way of putting it. I think it really is a grieving process. And, we can all hope who others are going to be and what those relationships are going to be. But the reality is we have to confront and look at what's actually going on and make the decisions best for us. And so I'm lucky to have a really supportive husband, and we're making our own new family, which is great. His family is really great as well. And so I think really focusing on what I do have and the supports that I do have are going to just be so important going forward and through that process in the next year or two.
I just have to say, as a young girl too, going through this whole story you just told me about, your survival is it's unbelievable. Like the willingness and the fortitude and the determination and to hold your truth, even in the face of your own mother denying it, is just like the strength of that young girl. I'm in awe, honestly. I'm in awe because I know so many people that have been through similar stories and didn't make it to the other side. They're dead now because they usually turn to drugs or something else that takes them out.
Absolutely. So, and I think about it often, like how, lucky I think about resilience a lot. It's funny. I wrote my law school application essay on resilience, and I think about it. It's so interesting to me how, how we create that and how some people can be so resilient or not. As when I was in high school, I remember going in the midst of all this, going to the library, and I bought like a cognitive behavioral therapy, like book for kids, right? Like to write stuff in, like, cause my mom wouldn't put me in therapy. And, I remember doing those things, and I just feel so lucky that I have whatever, I've been resilient. I've got a great life. I'm, married. I don't have addictions. Certainly I struggle, of course, with, anxiety and, certain mental health issues related to this. But the reality is I'm very fortunate, to have come out on the other side and be stronger, I think. So
I'm just in awe of you, honestly. And thank you so much for coming on and sharing this story with us. You just taught me so many things, and just the beautiful spirit of a human in survival, on the other side of it.
Thank you. And thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It's very cathartic and great to share the story. And I just hope that if there's other people out there as well, that they know that they can be resilient too. So.
Okay. I literally could start crying. Okay. Thank you again, honestly, from the bottom of my heart.
course. Thank you.
And if you want to be on the show, please email me at secretlifepodcast@icloud.com. Until next time. Thanks again for listening to the show. Please subscribe, rate, share, or send me a note at secretlifepodcast.com. And if you like to check out my book, head over to secretlifenovel.com or Amazon to pick up a copy for yourself or someone you love. Thanks again. See you soon.